Okay, so now we are going to go over the last part of the review. So number 17, given the linear parent function f of x equals x, determine which of the following statements correctly describes the new line that is formed by changing the slope, so that would be our m, to 1/3, and the y-intercept, so that's the b, to -3. So if we write that equation, it's going to be y equals 1/3 x minus 3. Our original equation, the parent function, is just y equals x. Okay? Remember, the m of this one is 1, the b is 0. The m of the second one is 1/3, the b is -3. So we know the easiest thing to look at is the b. So one of them was at 0. The second one is at -3. So if I sketch that on a graph, the first one's at 0. The second one is down here at -3. So I know I moved down. So I'm going to look. Okay, this one says up. That's gone. This one says up. This one says down. So that's still good. This one says up. So that's out. So my answer would be C. Okay, just to remember, if your M gets bigger, your line is steeper. Okay, if your M gets smaller, your line is less steep. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, number 18. Given the linear parent function f of x equals x, describe the new line that is formed by changing the slope to -3 and the y-intercept to 5. So I'm going to go ahead and write both of those in slope-intercept. So we have y equals x, where our m is 1, our b is 0. And we have y equals, our m was -3x, our b is +5. So I'm going to circle the changes from equation 1 to equation 2. So one of them is the negative, the next one's the 3, and then we have the 5. So I need to write down 3 things. Okay, so the negative reflects your line. Okay, so that was 1. 2 is the 3. Since 3 is bigger than 1, our line got steeper because of the 3. And then change 3, I went from a 0 to a +5, so it moved up 5. Okay. All right, number 19. The table represents some points on the graph of a linear function. Which equation represents the same relationship? So before I look at these equations, I want to get the equation of the table. So this is when we're going to go to Desmos. We're going to click the plus to add a table. We're going to enter the table. And then on a new line, we're going to have our y1 worm mx1 plus b. So we're going to go to Desmos and click the plus table. Now we're going to enter those numbers. So -28, -14, 14, 42. Then I'm going to come to y1, -198, -197, -195, -193. Remember, go to the second line. We have y1, click the ABC, worm, mx 1 plus b. Remember, I'm just worried about these numbers at the bottom. So my m for this one was 0.0714286. My b was negative 196. So if I write this equation, I want to go ahead and make that decimal a fraction. So I'm going to come back to Desmos. And in the third line, I'm going to put the whole thing. So 0.0714286. And divide that by 1 so that it gives you a number over here. Okay, so we know that if we write that equation, okay, we're not going to make that a fraction. If we write that equation, we know that that's our slope. And then we have minus 196. Okay, so it says which equation represents the same relationship? All of these equations are in point slope. So that's our y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. We know that m is our slope, and it needs to match the m here. So if I go into Desmos and do 1 divided by 14, I get that long decimal. So it's 1/14 because that decimal matched my other one. So I know the m needs to be 1/14. So I can get rid of d and I can get rid of b. Okay, after that, let's look. Okay, this has 28 and 198. This has 198 and 28. If I look, the 198 is in the y column, so it needs to be next to y. So my only option is C. Okay. Joseph drives 125 miles in 2.5 hours. At this rate, how far will he travel in 6 hours? So we're going to use words first. So we're going to have miles over hours. So we have 125 miles over 2.5 hours. Remember, my hours need to stay across from each other, so the 6 is going to go at the bottom, x is going to go at the top. So we're going to cross multiply what we know. So 125 times 6 is 750. Divide by what's left. So when I do that, I get 300, and since that's the number at the top, it's 300 miles. Okay, number 21. The scatter plot shows the number of CDs in millions that were sold from 1999 to 2005. Describe the correlation shown in the diagram. So when it says describe, it means is it positive? Is it negative? Or is it no correlation? So this tends to trend down. So this would be a negative correlation. All right. 22. The function y minus 18 equals 3.5 times x minus 5 can be used to determine the total distance that Mrs. Jones can travel in her canoe after x hours. What is the rate of change? Remember, that's another name for slope. So our m of the distance in miles with respect to time Mrs. Jones paddles. So this is not in slope-intercept. This is in what's called point slope. Okay, so since I'm looking for the rate of change, I'm just looking at that m value. So if I write this other equation underneath, I'm looking at the number that's in the same spot as m. So that's 3.5. So our m is 3.5. Okay, we're going to go ahead and cross out number 23. Okay, number 24. Determine the domain and range of the graph. So domain is our x, range is our y. So for our domain, we're going to look from the left to the right. Before I write inequalities or lists, I'm going to look for arrows. If I look on the left, I see an arrow. As I go to the right, there's another arrow. Remember, if you see two arrows, it is all real numbers. Okay, so for the range, that's when we go bottom to top. So I'm going to look at the bottom, go all the way to the top. So at the bottom, I see an arrow. At the top, I see an arrow. Same thing, all real numbers. All right, last one. A gym charges a $15 registration fee and $5 per session. The total cost, f of x, can be represented by this equation. So f of x equals 5x plus 15, where x is the number of sessions. Mario will be going to the gym no more than, that's going to be important, 4 times this week. What is the domain and the range? So, before we decide that, we need to decide, is this function continuous or is it discrete? Okay, remember, discrete is something you can count. Continuous is measured. So we are dealing with sessions. So I'm going to count the number of sessions, so it's going to be discrete. Okay, for domain and range on discrete. It's going to be a list. If it would have been continuous, that's where your inequalities come in. But since it's discrete, we're going to go ahead and list out our domain and range. So, for our x's, it tells me that x is the number of sessions. So he can go no times, 1 time, 2, 3. It also tells me he can't go more than 4 times. So 4 is going to end that. Okay, so to get the total cost, I'm going to go to Desmos and type that equation in. So I have y equals 5x plus 15. I need the table, so I'm going to click the gear. Okay, I'm looking at 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so I'm looking at the y values because I'm on range. So they would be 15, 20, 25, 30, and 35. So when I'm listing, I would have 15, 20, 25, 30, and 35. Okay, so again, we went to in Desmos, we entered the equation. Clicked on the gear. Click table. Okay, and then we entered what the numbers we needed. So we entered the x values to get the y values.